Where was his help? Why didn't they keep him safe? Regardless of the situation, they failed him.
Tonight, Winnipeg Police are under fire after a man dies in custody.
I think it is upsetting how this whole thing has been handled.
A company hired to clean up a Yukon mine faces multiple violations.
The industry is always going to have to come together in a respectful way to really honor and give life to the words of reconciliation.
And a historic deal with the Tahltan Nation on mining consultation. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ford. Welcome to APTN National News. Families are calling for more witnesses to come forward following the death of a First Nations man while in custody of the Winnipeg Police. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has more.
Where was his help? Why didn't they keep him safe? Regardless of the situation, they failed him.
At an emotional press conference, Jody Beardy questions how her partner, 37-year-old Elias Whitehead, died while in Winnipeg Police custody.
Who do we call if we need help? Regardless of the situation of who we are, we should not be profiled. Where is the humanity for Indigenous people?
According to a Winnipeg Police press release, officers responded to a report of a male in distress running into traffic and acting erratically. He was taken into custody and went into medical distress. He was then taken to hospital in critical condition and was later pronounced deceased. Beardy says information is missing from that press release and that a video recorded by a witness showed more.
I felt like I couldn't breathe. When I seen the video.
APTN has not seen the video. The case is currently being investigated by the Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba. Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe wrote an online post on the site's Substack following the incident. In it, he said officers were informed that a male had jumped in front of a woman's vehicle and started punching her window and attempted to enter her vehicle. He said Whitehead was combative and acting erratically. Smythe said use of force is rare.
Less than half of 1% of those calls involves any type of force at all, let alone lethal force.
Manitoba Kuwatanawi Okamaknak Grand Chief Garrison Satie says violence against Indigenous people is a regular occurrence.
Why is it that First Nation people have been victims of fatalities under the hands of the Winnipeg Police? This is not right. There's something deeply wrong with a system that allows our people to be victims of police brutality and also fatality.
Beardy says that behavior is out of character for Whitehead.
He was kind. He would help anyone who needed it, and he would befriend anyone.
Whitehead is from the Webekwe First Nation and was living in Tatasqueyak with Beardy. He was a carpenter and a level 1 heavy-duty mechanic and was in Winnipeg for training when the incident happened. His family said they were waiting on toxicology and autopsy reports. Indigenous leaders wrote to Winnipeg's mayor and Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe requesting in-custody deaths be reported to the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. They also requested a meeting to discuss collaboration in similar cases in the future. A meeting has not yet been scheduled. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Yukon government is facing criticism after a mining company they hired to clean up an abandoned mine was found to have committed multiple water license violations. Now, an environmental advocacy group and the Yukon NDP are criticizing the government on the issue. Here's Sarah Connors with more.
Minto Mine is an open-pit copper gold mine. It's located 240 kilometers northwest of Whitehorse on Selkirk First Nation settlement land. In May, Minto Minerals abandoned the mine following mounting financial troubles. Since then, Yukon government has been responsible for the mine. That same month, it contracted JDS Mining to do on-site work at the Minto site.
I think it is upsetting how this whole thing has been handled.
Louis Rifkind is a mining analyst for the Yukon Conservation Society. He's dismayed to learn a formal warning was issued last month to the mine's receiver, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for 3 violations to the mine's water license. That includes unauthorized dredging of the Yukon River during the height of the territory's salmon run.
So anytime you stir up sediment in a river or stream where salmon are either moving up or spawning, you're going to interrupt how they navigate, how they move, and even possibly where they spawn.
The formal warning states failure to comply with the terms of the mine's water license can result in a $15,000 fine and/or up to 6 months in jail. Rifkind feels there should have been serious consequences, especially when mining contracts are worth millions.
To be just given a warning, I mean, it's just a slap on the wrist. It's not acceptable.
The issue was also raised in the territory's legislature late last month. Yukon NDP leader Kate White criticized the Liberal government for what she says is a lack of environmental oversight at the mine site. But John Stryker, Yukon's minister in charge of mining, disagrees. He argued that mining companies sometimes make mistakes and that his government is taking good care of the site. We also reached out to Selkirk First Nation, but they did not respond to our request for comment. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
JDS Mining responded to our request for comment and says it didn't have the water licenses in its possession at the time. The company claims it was forced to dredge the river because of rapidly dropping water levels and the need to move 2 boulders. It also says it did the work with Selkirk First Nation's blessing and has since met with the ministry and accepted their recommendations. The Tahltan Nation and the province of BC signed a historic mining agreement Wednesday. The agreement focuses on the Red Chris mine near the community of Dease Lake in northern BC, which is located on Tahltan territory. Any future activities at the mine will now require consent and approval from the nation. The agreement was reached under Section 7 of the province's Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Tahltan Central Government President Chad Norman Day says the agreement respects Tahltan title, rights, and jurisdiction.
When there's major development in Tahltan territory, the world, the province, industry, they require our consent. And if we're to work together and thrive together, the province and the Tahltan Nation and industry is always going to have to come together in a respectful way to really honor and give life to the words of reconciliation.
To Ottawa now, where Correctional Investigator Ivan Zinger released his annual report this week. And once again, the news is not good for Indigenous peoples. Despite counting for just 5% of Canada's population, Indigenous peoples make up 32% of those who are federally incarcerated. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
At a press conference in Ottawa on Thursday morning, Zinger said Correctional Services Canada, or CSC, has been ignoring recommendations from his office for more than 5 decades.
For many years now, my office has been sounding the alarm. The discriminatory treatment of Indigenous persons in federal custody was among the first set of issues raised by my office when it was created 50 years ago. In the decades that follow, my office has issued more than 70 recommendations specific to Indigenous corrections. Sadly, most of these calls have gone unanswered.
In this year's annual report, the Correctional Investigator released an update to the Spirit Matters report first published in 2013. It finds that Correctional Services continues to resist using Indigenous-run healing lodges as an alternative to standard incarceration, undervalues and underutilizes elders in the system, and fails to employ enough Indigenous staff in leadership positions. The Correctional Investigator said Indigenous-run healing lodges are consistently underfunded.
We find it very upsetting that Correctional Services of Canada does not fund those Section 81 agreements appropriately. They do it at a discount, at a 40% discount.
Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron said the treatment of elders employed by corrections is appalling, and they should be accorded the same labor rights as all other corrections staff.
The differential treatment of elders that was also documented in the report was also and particularly concerning. Canada must respect its own laws on human rights and employment standards. Under the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, elders are guaranteed the same status as chaplains and other religious leaders.
Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief for Quebec-Labrador, Ghislain Picard, said CSC also continues to ignore input from Indigenous stakeholders on how to make the correction system better.
Oftentimes we find ourselves, as I said earlier, on the sidelines. We're just really, looking over to decisions that are made about our peoples and, their well-being. And to me, that's totally unacceptable. So that level of discourse and engagement has to be brought up.
In a release statement, Minister of Public Safety Dominic LeBlanc says engaging Indigenous communities is essential to addressing their overrepresentation in the system. And as part of this work, a Deputy Commissioner of Indigenous Corrections was appointed earlier this year. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Thanks, Fraser. Well, 6 people will be running to replace Roseanne Archibald as National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. The nomination period closed today, and there are a lot of familiar names running. Reginald Belrose, who served as chief of Muskowaquin First Nation in Saskatchewan for 17 consecutive years, is running again. He finished second to Roseanne Archibald in the last election. Craig Mackinaw, a former chief and current councillor in Ermineskin Cree Nation in Alberta, is also running. David Pratt, who is currently vice chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan, was the first candidate to announce. Dean Sayers, who was the chief of Batchewana First Nation in Ontario for nearly 2 decades, is running for national chief. Current AFN Regional Chief for Manitoba, Cindy Woodhouse, who played a major role in the ousting of Archibald, is running for the top job. And journalist and former Grand Chief for Northern Manitoba, Sheila North, is taking her second run at National Chief. The election will take place December 6th at the AFN Special Assembly in Ottawa through a hybrid vote. Coming up after the break, we'll speak with the journalist who helped piece together the investigation into Buffy St. Marie. Stick around. Welcome back. A Saskatoon woman accused of faking her own death and the death of her son has pleaded guilty to 3 charges. Don Walker pleaded guilty to 3 of 9 charges: forging a passport, possessing a forged document, and abduction in contravention of a custody order. The mother and son were reported missing in July 2022 and were found safe in Oregon 13 days later. Walker was given a 1-year conditional sentence, which can be served in the community. She must also serve 18 months probation and is still facing charges in the United States. Last week's CBC's investigative program, The Fifth Estate, dropped a year-long investigation about the roots of icon Buffy St. Marie. The program unearthed a birth certificate from Massachusetts that cast doubt on her claims on being adopted and whether or not she is Indigenous. Jacqueline Keeler is a journalist and author based in Portland, Oregon, and worked on the Fifth Estate documentary. She joins us now. Jackie, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what role you played in the Fifth Estate's documentary on Buffy St. Marie?
Yes, I initiated the investigation. I as noted in the show, my curiosity was raised when I was watching the PBS American Masters show last October, and that was the month I broke the Satching Littlefeather story, and so I had been traveling quite a bit early in the month. I didn't get home until almost Halloween, I think, and sat down and watched it with my son, because I like to inspire him to sort of, see what other Native people have accomplished. And full disclosure, I used her song "Carrying It On" as the sort of opening theme song to my radio show here in Portland during the pandemic called American Standoff.
Jackie, among the concerns that have been raised with this investigation is that Buffy St. Marie's family in the U.S. is estranged from Buffy, and that the birth records and other records like the marriage certificate cannot be taken as absolute truth. How do you respond to those issues?
Yeah, I think, well, the Stoneham registrar, the official in Stoneham, Massachusetts, she was unequivocal that this is an original birth certificate. And but, you know, if people don't believe that, I think there's a simple answer, which is that Buffy could do a DNA test or a blood test to compare herself to her Santa Maria cousins and her niece to see if she is actually, or even her sister, to see if she is actually related to them or not by blood. So I think that would solve it right there. You know, if she really wanted to relieve the trauma that this is causing, she would do that pronto, right away.
Jackie, people have also taken issue with the lack of comment from Pipot First Nation, 60 Scoop survivors, anyone on customary adoptions, criticism that there wasn't a trauma-informed approach to telling the story. Would you agree with any of those concerns?
Well, I mean, a trauma-informed approach probably should have been considered by Buffy St. Marie when she began making the claims. And I think it's pretty clear that she's a white woman, a white American woman from the United States. My own family has an out-adoption story. I have, you know, a very close relative who I've never gotten to meet because of this. So I am myself a member of that group of Native families impacted by this sort of phenomenon. And I think that the best answer, though, as far as the ethical considerations, was actually posted on Twitter in response to you sharing the video, the APTN video. And basically what they said was that while taking a trauma-informed approach is a reasonable consideration, it doesn't mean the CBC should be asked to hide the truth. This would be against journalism ethical standards. And I would agree with that. I mean, this idea that we shouldn't look, you know, that's what allows fraud to proliferate, and they rely on that. And the trauma that pretendionism causes Native people, that is not enough. That is not focused on enough. There's not enough focus on that. Instead, it's on the right to of the con artists to continue their charade.
Sorry, we're definitely out of time. We'll have to leave it there,
fine.
but appreciate you taking some time for us today.
Thank you.
The Yellowknife International Film Festival kicks off this week. We'll hear from some of those hitting the big screen after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And April Isidore shared these ice formations to a setting sun along her home in Swan River, Alberta. Thanks for that, April. To be our next photo of the day, you can send your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, 9 with showers in Halifax, 8 in Charlottetown, -3 in Kuujjuaq, 0 for Nain, partly cloudy, and 11 in Montreal, +3 with snow in Chibougamau, +8 with showers in Sault Ste. Marie, rain, and 7 in North Bay, +3 with snow in Thunder Bay, snow and 0 for Sioux Lookout, -2 in God's Lake, sunny and 3 below for the Paw, +1 with snow in Winnipeg, 1 above and sunny in Dauphin, -2 with snow in Regina, cloudy and 0 for Saskatoon, cloudy and 1 in Meadow Lake, -3 in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -6 in Fort Chip with snow, +6 in snow in Grand Prairie, 7 above with flurries in Edmonton, 8 in Lethbridge, +12 with rain in Vancouver, showers in 13 in Victoria, snow and 7 for Prince George, +4 in Smithers, -12 with snow in Old Crow, flurries and 0 in Whitehorse, -11 in Yellowknife, -3 with snow in Norman Wells. -16 with flurries in Sax Harbor. 8 below in Pawlatuck. -7 in Chesterfield. -6 in Baker Lake and Whale Cove. 11 below in Resolute. -6 with snow in Joe Haven. Moviegoers are in for a treat north of 60. The 2023 Yellowknife International Film Festival begins this week, and it features an impressive Indigenous lineup. Our Charlotte Mort-Jacobs has that story.
There's buzz at the box office in the Northwest Territories. Welcome to the 2023 Yellowknife International Film Festival.
These are the fastest horses in the world.
Cinema goers have been treated to an impressive lineup of Indigenous talent, including an in-progress screening of Calvin Redver's feature, Cold Road, about an Indigenous woman and her dog trying to make their way north when a semi-truck driver starts hunting them on the highway.
Anybody who's been out here knows that the highways can be long and lonesome at times. And so it's set within that world. But there's also like a beauty to these roads, and so it's kind of taking a lot of that and creating a thriller out of what I think is a unique location.
Redverse, a member of the Dene-Naquai First Nation, says the film shot in Hay River is designed to be an edge-of-your-seat story.
We did stunts on the Northwest Territories highways. It was like a car and a truck, like literally bashing into each other. And I just did a quick little tech check of those scenes, and they're big and they're loud, and they give you the tingles.
Cold Road lead actor Roseanne Supernal says Indigenous representation in film is key, both on and off camera.
No one tells stories the way that we do, especially when it comes to subject matter that includes us. So it's really important that we're starting to see Indigenous directors directing Indigenous stories, Indigenous writers writing Indigenous stories.
The festival boasts 15 in-person screenings and 6 online shows, with several northern debuts of Indigenous NWT films such as
And Dene Day means the land is with us.
Dene on the Land, and She Gives Birth. The Film Fest runs November 1st to 5th. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Over to Ottawa now, where Annette Francis is standing by with a preview of tonight's Nation to Nation.
Ani, I'm Annette Francis. Join me after the news for a new episode of Nation to Nation. Calls for the return for icon Buffy St. Marie's Juno Award continues to ring out. Cree opera musician Rhonda Head shares her thoughts.
Non-Indigenous persons should ever take our space. We already have a hard time finding a space.
And a non-Indigenous member of Fort William First Nation discusses customary adoptions and what it means for individuals and communities. We'll also hear from a residential school survivor and her trip to Rome this fall. She failed to meet the Pope to discuss calls to end abuse. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Annette. Looks like a great show with some good guests there. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, head over to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Stick around. Nation to Nation is up next. We'll see you back here tomorrow.